Chapter 15. My work detail was on its way to the quarry to break more rocks one morning when another capo came to speak to ours. The two capos talked for a moment, and our capo ordered us to stop. I kept my head down, but tried to look around with my eyes to see what was going on. Something different was happening, and different was never good. Our capo kept us standing there without saying anything else for a long time. What was happening? Why had we stopped? Were we in trouble? Were we going to be killed? The other prisoners had to be asking themselves the same questions, but of course, none of us spoke. To speak was to invite a beating. We would be told our fates when our captors decided we needed to know. Turn around, our capo said at last. March. We headed away from the quarry, which would have been a relief if I thought we were going someplace better. We passed a place where prisoners were shot over the pits that they had dug for themselves, and I said a silent prayer of thanks. But then we passed the barracks and the main gate. We were being marched to the depot. A train waited at the side rail, but it didn't have passenger cars. It was fitted out with cattle cars. We were to be transported like livestock. We were herded up a ramp into one of the train cars, under the whips and clubs of the capos and the SS officers. I was one of the first ones inside. The car was empty and looked recently washed, but it smelled of urine and vomit and excrement. I reeled back. But there was nowhere to go. In! The guards yelled at us, and I was pushed up against the far wall. More and more prisoners were forced into the car. They packed so many of us in, I was crushed between three other men and the wall. But it was like that for everyone. I couldn't even raise my arm. I felt trapped again, like I had felt under the floorboards and down in the salt mine. I couldn't be here. I had to have space, air. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. A man at the other end of the car started to scream, giving voice to my panic. Let me out. I need to get out of here. He kicked to the wall of the cattle car. Please, I can't take it. Crack! An SS officer shot the man through the wall of the cattle car, and he no longer had to worry about not being able to breathe. If I panicked, if I broke, I would suffer the same fate. Instead, I worked my way toward a ventilation grate on the wall of the train car and pressed my face up against it, breathing in the fresh air from the outside. My heart still raced, but at least I could breathe. We stood squeezed into the train car for half a day, while the Nazis loaded more prisoners into the other cars. We had no food, no water, no way to go to the bathroom. Soon I understood why the train car had smelled so bad and would only smell worse before this ordeal was through. Later in the afternoon, the train lurched and we were away. None of us knew where we were going. I hoped it would be better than Tresbinia, but by now, I knew not to dream. False hope only made things worse. There was something in the anticipation guide that asked about hope, guys. Let's try to remember that for when we go back to talk about that. It was cold along the wall of the cattle car. Wind whipped through the spaces in between the car's wooden slats, making me shiver. But at least I had air. The prisoners in the middle complained of it being too hot and too close, and not being able to breathe. So I shivered while I sucked the freezing air into my lungs, and I didn't complain. As the train made its way to wherever we were going, I watched the landscape slide by. Plaszow, Waliska, Tresbinia. They had all been right around Krakow, my home. Now I was truly leaving home and seeing the outside world for the first time. I had never imagined it would be under these circumstances. I saw snow-covered fields, farmhouses with electric lights burning in the windows, forests, a river, a busy road with cars and trucks. After all my time in the work camps, it was strange to see people in the real world eating dinner, and going to school and watching movies. But that was the world for non-Jews. My world was concentration camps and salt mines, starvation and cattle cars. The train slowed and the other prisoners began to stir. Were we at our final destination? Did anyone recognize where we were? I watched through the grate as a little train station slid into view, but I couldn't make out the name on the station sign. I could see people, though, regular people. Polish men carrying briefcases, Polish women pushing strollers. A child in a blue coat pointed at our train, and her mother turned her away. 2 boys waited with their parents beside a stack of luggage. They were going on a trip, maybe a vacation. "They're going to turn you into soap, Jews," one of the boys yelled. He couldn't have been much older than 5 or 6. "No," his older brother said. "They're taking you to the gas chambers." The boys scooped up snow from the platform and threw snowballs at the train. One of them exploded on the grate near me, and I was showered with slush and ice. I was angry until I realized the snow was water and that I was dying of thirst. I licked what I could off my face and my shirt. The train lurched, and we were off again, the boys taunting us and throwing more snowballs at us as we left. "And you wanted to escape," a man near me whispered to another man. "You wanted to run off into the woods and fight. But do you see? Do you see what the rest of them think about us? These people would sell you back to the Nazis for a sack of potatoes and then toast you at the dinner table." Guys, toast means, you've seen them do that on TV. They hold up the glasses and they say, "A toast, let's make a toast." And they'll have a drink in it and they'll clink their glasses, and that's what he's talking about. We did not arrive at our destination that night or the entire next day, and still we had no food or water. I drifted in and out of sleep, that blessed escape from hunger. I would have collapsed from exhaustion if I hadn't been held up by the prisoners squeezed in all around me. One morning or night, I couldn't tell which it was, I woke up to find the man next to me, leaning heavily on my shoulder. I shook him to wake him up, but he wouldn't open his eyes. Something about the way he stood there, something about the way he moved, stiff and awkward, made my skin prickle. His flesh was gray like a Mussulman's, his lips cracked and frozen at the corners. Then I realized he wasn't breathing. The man leaning on me was dead. I squirmed and twisted, trying to push him away, but there was nowhere for either of us to go. The men near me roused from their sleep to grumble at me, to be still. And I gave up. The dead man would be my companion until we got to wherever it was we were going. I worried I wouldn't be able to sleep again, knowing that there was a corpse leaning on me. But soon the cold took me, and I re-entered the half-wake world of the barely alive. I woke again to an orange horizon. A sunrise? A sunset? My throat was cold and dry, my tongue like burlap. It had snowed while I was asleep, and the ventilation grate near me was covered with the stuff, grayish-white from the engine smoke. I tried to reach it with my tongue to lick some of the precious frozen water off the grate, but it was just out of reach. My arms were pinned at my sides by the crush of people in the car, but I wanted that snow. I needed that snow to survive. Slowly, painfully, I pulled my arm up between the dead man and the sleeping one beside me. The sleeper muttered in his sleep as I jostled him, and he pushed my hand back down without even waking. But I had to have that snow. I pushed again, and again the man pushed back. I elbowed him in the sunken stomach. He whimpered in his sleep and stopped fighting. My arm was free. I scooped snow from the grate. My thin fingers were so cold they were blue, but I didn't care. I shoved the snow in my mouth like a toddler eating cake. My throat was so dry I gagged on it, but I forced the melting snow down, ignoring the shocking pain in my teeth from the cold. It was water, wonderful water. Not even a pastry at the corner bakery at Lowalska Street had ever tasted so good. With a pang, I remembered going there on Thursdays with my father, eating a treat and watching the pigeons in the park while my father read his newspaper. I pushed that memory away and reached for more gray snow. The orange horizon turned out to be a sunrise, which turned into a bright blue winter morning. Our train slowed again, this time not for a station. We were shunted to a side track while another train of cattle cars passed us, going in the opposite direction. The other train slowed and then stopped alongside. "You there," someone called from across the way. "You there, in the other train." I squinted through the slats in the wall. There were people in the other train packed in like us. We were all Jews being shipped around occupied Poland like coal or meat. "What?" A man a meter or two away from me answered. "What does our train say? Where are we going?" the man in the other train asked. I hadn't thought the trains would have our destination on them, but most trains did. I remembered there were plates at the top that could be switched out for different destinations. I peered through the slats at the other car, trying to see. "Treblinka," I called, seeing the placard at last. "It says you're going to Treblinka." I didn't know the place. "Where are we going?" "Birkenau," the man on the other train called. I had never heard of Birkenau either, but the word spread through the train in scared whispers. Birkenau, Birkenau, Birkenau. The other train rocked and started moving again, and soon we were on our way. The man next to me, the live one, mumbled and shook his head. "What is it?" I asked. "What's Birkenau? Another work camp?" "You don't go to Birkenau to work," the man said, his voice hoarse and dry. "You go there to die. Birkenau isn't a concentration camp. It's a death camp." A chill ran through me. The boys at the depot had been right, I realized. They had known. The Nazis were going to kill us. They were going to turn us into soap. The train rocked back and forth, back and forth. Outside, it began to snow again. "You want my advice?" the man next to me rasped. "When they take us to the gas chambers, try to stand right under the exhaust vents. Is that how you survive?" The man laughed, or tried to. "No, you won't survive. None of us will. But if you stand under the exhaust vents, you won't suffer as long before you die." All right, so let's look at our next set of pictures for chapter 15. It says, "But then we passed the barracks and the main gate." This is when he's walking out of Treblinka. This is some old pictures of Treblinka. See, the barracks have rounded roofs there, and their famous gates and their electrified wire. Says, right, the main gate at Treblinka, a sub-camp of Auschwitz. So it was a smaller camp of Auschwitz. The cattle cars, there's a picture of them. This is the one at Auschwitz at that gate. We saw it before. Cattle cars were used to transport prisoners. Ventilation vents can be seen on the second panel from the far end. The depot is in the background. This is the depot. And do you see this right here, guys? This is a ventilation grate. It sort of reminds you like when you have a heating duct in your floor, but this was on the wall. This was like if you had cattle, if you were hauling, of course you wouldn't pack them in there, but if you just had 10 or so cattle or 5 in here, then they could get air, fresh air. And that's where Yannick stuck his nose out so he could get the outside air. This is the interior. And if you ever get to go to the museum in Washington, D.C., the Holocaust Museum, there's actually one there. Of course, you can't walk all around in it. They've got it roped off because people would be carving their names or something on it. But that one that we walked through at the Holocaust Memorial Museum smelled like wood. It smelled like old wood. But obviously Yannick's that he got into didn't. The SS guards would threaten to kill concentration camp prisoners and turn them into soap. That was a myth started during World War I. There you go. According to the Holocaust historian Deborah Lipstadt, there's no proof that the Nazis made Jews into soap in a mass fashion. So there may have been some sicko that did it, but I kept hearing about that, but I never have seen any evidence of it in any of my research. All right, they're taking you to the gas chambers. This train is headed to Buchenwald, a concentration camp. There's Buchenwald. And there were two types of camps, concentration camps, and Yannick calls them work camps. Their purpose was to work prisoners to death by starvation. Extermination camp, also called death camps, their primary purpose was to kill as many people as fast as possible. 90% of the Jews who died in the Holocaust died in gas chambers. The gas chambers were rooms where prisoners were killed with poison gas that came out of vents or shower heads. But now, that says that, but in the research that I've done, and I'm not saying it didn't, but they weren't shower heads. It was Zyklon, and they might have done that when they might have used the shower heads when they hooked some pipes to exhaust on vans and used exhaust from a vehicle to kill people. But eventually that wasn't effective enough. It didn't kill enough people. It didn't kill them fast enough. It took too much effort. You couldn't kill very many people. So they found the Zyklon B, which we'll talk about, which is the crystals that were used to exterminate critters, rats and mice and bugs that might get in people's house. So we'll talk about that later.